It was a rainy afternoon when Lila decided to take a walk in the quiet streets near her apartment. She often went out when she needed a break from the noise of her thoughts. Today felt heavier than usual. Her mind kept replaying the argument she had with her best friend the night before. Words she wished she hadn't said, and things left unsaid, weighed on her like the dark clouds above. As she walked, the rhythmic sound of raindrops on her umbrella made her feel a little calmer. She passed by a small café she had never noticed before. Its warm yellow light spilled onto the wet pavement, and for some reason, it felt inviting. On impulse, she pushed the door open and stepped inside. The café was cozy. There were only a few people, each lost in their own world, sipping coffee or reading quietly. Lila moved to a corner table by the window and watched as the rain ran down the glass. It was peaceful, but she still felt the heaviness in her chest. A voice broke her thoughts. "Is this seat taken?" Lila looked up to see a young man holding a steaming cup of tea. He had a kind smile, and his eyes looked curious, almost like he could see right through her sadness. "No, not at all," she replied, gesturing to the empty chair across from her. He sat down and nodded in thanks. For a few moments they didn't speak, listening instead to the soft music and the patter of rain outside. Then, almost naturally, he said, "Rough day?" Lila hesitated. It was strange to speak to someone she had never met, yet she found herself nodding. "You could say that," she admitted. He smiled gently. "I think we all have those days. Sometimes it helps to just talk, even if it's to a stranger." For the first time that day, Lila felt a small spark of relief. She realized how much she needed someone to listen, even for a few minutes, without judgment. And though the conversation had only just begun, she felt an unexpected sense of comfort, like the storm outside was slowly easing. Lila stirred her coffee slowly, feeling the warmth seep into her hands. The young man across from her seemed relaxed, yet attentive, as if he was waiting for her to speak, but not pushing her to do so. After a long pause, she finally found the courage to say something. "I had an argument with my best friend," she began quietly. "It was stupid, really. But now I can't stop thinking about it." He nodded, understanding in his eyes. "I know that feeling. You replay every word, every gesture, wondering if you could have done things differently." "Yes, exactly that," Lila said, surprised that he seemed to know so well what she was feeling. "I hate that it keeps bothering me." He took a sip of his tea and smiled faintly. "Sometimes, we hold on to things because we think we can fix them in our heads. But the truth is, the only way to move on is to face them, even if it's scary." Lila frowned, unsure how to respond. His words sounded simple, almost cliché, yet there was something comforting about them. It was like a small crack had opened in the wall she had built around her feelings. "You make it sound easy," she said softly, a hint of humor in her tone. "But it's not." "No, it's not," he admitted. "But sometimes it helps to talk to someone who doesn't know the story. Someone who isn't part of the problem. That way you can hear yourself clearly." For a moment, Lila just listened to him. She noticed the way the light from the cafe reflected in his eyes, and how it seemed to make the rain outside less gloomy. There was something in his calmness that made her own anxiety feel lighter. "You know," she said after a while, "I almost didn't come in here today. I just wanted to walk and drown in my thoughts." "Well, I'm glad you did," he replied gently. "Otherwise, we wouldn't be having this conversation." Lila smiled faintly, feeling an unfamiliar sense of hope. Maybe, just maybe, this short encounter could change something inside her. She wasn't sure how yet, but for the first time that afternoon, the weight in her chest felt slightly less suffocating. The rain had slowed to a drizzle outside, and the cafe felt even cozier as the afternoon light dimmed. Lila and the young man continued their quiet conversation, the silence between them no longer awkward but comfortable. "So, what do you do when life feels like it's too much?" he asked suddenly, leaning back in his chair. His voice was calm, inviting her to share honestly. Lila thought for a moment. I don't know. I try to distract myself, keep busy, but it never really works. Sometimes I just wish I could disappear for a while." Her voice trembled slightly, though she didn't look away. He nodded slowly. "I get that. I used to feel the same way. That's why I started writing. Even just small notes to myself. Sometimes it's easier to understand your feelings when you see them on paper. That's actually a good idea, Lila admitted. I've never really tried that. I usually just stuff everything inside until it explodes. He smiled faintly. Most of us do that. But letting it out even in small ways makes a difference. You'll see. For a few minutes, they talked about small, ordinary things. Favorite books, music, the funny way rain sounds on rooftops. It was light, almost mundane, but for Lila it felt like a relief. She realized how much she had missed simple conversations that weren't rushed or forced. Then, he leaned forward slightly, his eyes curious. Can I ask something personal? Lila hesitated but nodded. Sure. Why did you come here today? Not just the cafe, but out of your apartment at all. His tone was gentle, not probing. She thought about it. The truth raw and unpolished. I guess I needed to escape myself for a while, to get away from my thoughts. But I didn't expect this. She gestured vaguely between them. I didn't expect to actually talk to someone who gets it. He smiled, a real understanding smile. Sometimes, life surprises us. A short conversation can change more than we expect. Lila felt a warmth in her chest, something she hadn't felt for Deza. Tiny spark of connection, the kind that makes the world seem a little less lonely. She realized that even strangers could make an impact, even with just a few words. As the rain eased further, she wondered how this brief meeting might ripple into the rest of her day or maybe even her life. And for the first time in a long time, she felt a quiet sense of hope. By now, the cafe had grown quieter. The soft hum of the espresso machine and the occasional clink of cups filled the space between their words. Lila felt an unexpected sense of ease, as if the weight she had carried all day was slowly lifting. He leaned back, a thoughtful expression on his face. You know, he said quietly, sometimes the people who surprise us most are the ones we barely notice at first. Lila frowned, unsure what he meant. How do you mean? He smiled gently. Take this afternoon, for example. You came in feeling overwhelmed, weighed down by your own thoughts. I came in hoping for a quiet cup of tea. Neither of us expected to meet anyone, but here we are. And it's changed both our days, hasn't it? Lila thought about that. It was true. She felt lighter, somehow, just talking to him. But there was more to it, something she couldn't quite explain. Yes, I suppose it has, she admitted. He nodded, his eyes reflecting a hint of seriousness. Life is full of small moments like this. Sometimes we overlook them, thinking they're nothing. But even a short conversation, a few kind words, it can change how we see things. Lila's fingers traced the rim of her coffee cup, thinking of the argument with her friend, the heaviness she had felt that morning, and the storm of thoughts that had chased her all day. Could a simple conversation really help her start to let go? She wanted to believe it could. Then, unexpectedly, he paused, as if weighing whether to share something more. There's something else I want to tell you, he said softly. I've been going through a hard time myself lately. I didn't come here to find someone to talk to. I came here to escape my own thoughts. And yet, meeting you, it's reminded me that connection matters, even in the smallest moments. Lila blinked, surprised. She had thought he was the calm, steady one, the one who could give her advice. But he had his own struggles too. Somehow, that made the conversation feel even more real, more meaningful. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Outside, the rain had nearly stopped, leaving the streets glistening under the fading sunlight. And inside, the two strangers shared a quiet understanding, a recognition that sometimes, even the briefest encounters could leave a lasting impact. Lila realized that life didn't always have to be heavy. Sometimes, it was enough to take one small step, say one simple word, or share one short conversation to change the course of a day or, maybe even more. The rain had finally stopped, leaving the streets outside shining with reflections of the city lights. Lila glanced out the window, feeling the cool, fresh air brush against her face through the slightly open cafe door. The world outside seemed brighter, quieter, and somehow more inviting. She turned back to him, feeling a sense of gratitude she couldn't quite put into words. Thank you, she said softly, for listening, and for talking with me. He smiled, the kind of smile that made someone feel understood without judgment. "Thank you too," he replied. "You reminded me that even on the hardest days, small connections matter. They remind us we're not alone." Lila realized that the afternoon had been more than just a distraction from her thoughts. It had been a gentle reminder that sometimes healing didn't need grand gestures or long explanations. Sometimes it just needed a few kind words shared between two people who didn't know each other. She felt lighter now, a small hope stirring in her chest. Maybe she could reach out to her friend tomorrow. Maybe she could start letting go of the heaviness that had weighed her down all week. And maybe, just maybe, the world wasn't as lonely as it had felt. He glanced at his watch and sighed softly. "I should get going," he said, standing up. "But I'm really glad we met, even if it was just for a short while." Lila nodded. "Me too." She watched him leave the café, disappear into the glistening streets, and yet she didn't feel sad. She felt changed. A short conversation had done what days of thinking alone could not. As she gathered her things, she realized that life had a way of surprising her, even in the smallest ways. A stranger, a few kind words, and a shared moment had reminded her that hope could appear when she least expected it. Walking home, Lila felt lighter. She hummed softly to herself, a small smile on her lips. The argument with her friend still lingered, but it didn't feel like a mountain anymore. Maybe tomorrow she could start fixing it. Maybe tomorrow she could smile again without guilt. And as she stepped through the door of her apartment, she carried with her the simple truth she had learned that day. Sometimes, all it takes is a short conversation to change the way you see the world and yourself.